I'm Kim, America's Face of Dating, and today we're going to be talking about how to stop depression. So in order for you to get something out of this video, I need you to come at this with an open mind, but I once heard that in order for someone else to open up to you, then you must first open up to them and share with them who you are and show them who you are in and out. And so I wanted to share with you really what I've been through and the depression that I've been through, and hopefully you can relate to it, and so it can cause us to have some relationship. My brother and I were born to this very, very rich family, but it wasn't until about 5 years old when my parents, they went through a very, very bad divorce. And so it's very, very difficult for me to talk about still to this day, but I know that it is used to impact lives, and so I have to talk about it. They went through this very, very bad divorce, and so basically my life went from very, very rich, having everything I wanted, had all these friends, to basically nothing. We went to go live in a shelter. I stayed in a shelter for a long time, and while I was in the shelter, I was also in school. I was just getting into school, and so the families of my neighborhood and my town, they saw that, cops were showing up to our house every other day or like a couple times a week. And so the parents of those children, they told them not to really involve themselves with me. And so if they were my friends, the parents were like, just stop talking to him and basically cut that kid off. I remember, I had like all these friends in school, and we would sit at this circle table with 8 seats at lunch, and over the course of a week, these kids just basically vanished from my table. And I went from having a lot of friends to basically having no friends at all, and I got very, very lonely. That's not really where the depression came in at. The depression started to form when, after my parents went through the divorce, they also went through this financial crisis. They had to commit bankruptcy, and so not only was I sitting at the lunch tables alone, but I was sitting at the lunch tables with no lunch, because I remember our school basically operated where if you got your lunch, you had to go up, get a tray, get your lunch, and then you had to swipe your card, and that's how you paid. But I remember if someone didn't have the money to pay for their lunch, then basically like the lunch ladies, they would just take your tray and basically just throw your food away or like put it back into the buffet. And so like you're in line, and you have like the entire lunch people, the entire line just watching you, everyone get your food, swipe your card. I remember I'm like trying to get my food, and there's no money on my account to even like get the food because we were so broke, we were so poor, and I'm in line. And so the lady's like swiping my card, right? She's trying to swipe it. She's like, keeps swiping it, and she's like, your balance says it's negative, like you actually owe money, and so you can't actually eat today. And so I remember she takes it to my lunch, and I remember that happened. Sometimes there was money in my account, sometimes there wasn't, because we had this arrangement with the school, because the principal actually told my family that based on income, we were one of the bottom 1% poorest families to attend my school. And so like sometimes they would have money in my account, sometimes they wouldn't. And so there was a lot of days where I basically was sitting at lunch alone. I remember one day I was so fed up with it, just like eyes watching me getting my lunch taken from me every other day. They're probably just like, oh, that kid's poor, that kid's weird, whatever. And so I remember just like slamming everything down. I ran to the bathroom, I started crying, and it was a very, very miserable time of my life. In high school, that's where my clinically depressed days actually came into effect. My family was still suffering financially, like very, very heavily. So asking them for money, it was very, very difficult, because either my mom, if I asked my mom for money, she would break down and start crying, and she'd be like, well, I'm not gonna be able to eat this week. And then if I asked my dad for money, then he would usually just get very, very angry and cuss. And so I didn't want to ask them for any money. And so, but I really want to try out for the baseball team. And so my mom eventually lent me some money. It was very, very hard to get that money out of her, but we got the money out, and I go and I try out for the baseball team because you had to have money to pay for the baseball team. And I also had a girlfriend at the time who was very, very sweet to me, who was very, very loving. And I really messed it up with her because after witnessing my parents' divorce, I really had this heat transfer. And the heat transfer, what that is in psychology, is where like if you are in a miserable state, then you tend to lash out and project that emotion onto the people that you love. So it's like the heat transfer, like they touch you, like obviously you get hot, like they burn, right? So you're transferring that heat to them. I had this very, very loving girlfriend, and I was putting her through this miserable time with me because I was miserable myself, and so I kept heat transferring onto her. And I'd work up the money. I'd try out for the baseball team and spend like months like practicing, trying out, working hard. And the day comes where we're supposed to find out if we made the team or not. And I go look at the white sheet. I'm scanning the names on the sheet where I'm like, did I make it? Did I make it? And I promised my mom, I was like, I promise you, like, if you lend me the money, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make the team. Like, I have to make the team. I remember I'm scanning the sheet all the way down. My name's not there. And I got cut. And that was also the same day when my very first girlfriend broke up with me. And so it was like a double whammy. It hit me all on the same day. And that's where I became very, very clinically depressed. Basically, very, very clinically depressed means you're potentially suicidal. You basically hit like a doctor's criteria for like you probably need some help. And so I get clinically depressed, but we don't have money to afford any of the medication or the help that I can get. And I didn't want to ask my parents or my family for that money because obviously they were there in a very, very hard financial burden themselves. And so I remember I was like, how in the hell am I going to get out of this depression? And they advised that like someone watches over me because they're like, okay, like he's very, very depressed. He could actually commit suicide. But I remember during those days I used to spend time because I really had no friends. My girlfriend broke up with me, got cut from the team. I'd spend a lot of my days with these woods behind my house, and I'd go down to the woods and just sit by like this creek all day long and just be by myself and just have these thoughts flowing through my mind. But it wasn't until university when I got introduced to a club promoter. And after I got introduced to this club promoter, I really learned about attraction and dating. And so what I really learned about attraction and dating from this club promoter is that success with women and success in relationships really comes from how you communicate to yourself. Because if you can communicate yourself with these confident thought loops, then you're more likely to be successful with women overall. After I really got involved in this club promoting industry, I learned how to do that, and that's really what I want to share with you today. After that, I formed Awakening Alpha, I formed Sonichem Studies, and I wrote my best-selling book about attraction, dating, and relationships in that community. But something I really learned about studying thousands of people, having conversations with thousands of people across the country, and helping thousands of people through their issues in all aspects of their life, I really tended to realize that people tend to avoid their emotions, they tend to endure their emotions, or they tend to fight their emotions. And I was more of the fighting type. Jim Carrey said that depression is your avatar telling you that it is tired of trying to play the role of the character that you were trying to play. Most people, they label emotions as positive or negative, but I really need you to be open with what I'm about to share with you, because in order for you to remove depression, you need to first change your perception, because emotions are messages. Corey Wayne, he said that pain is life's way of telling you that you're stuck and that you need to move past something in order for that pain to go away. In order for you to grow, you need to let go. And usually that comes from letting go of some thought or perception of your situation. Just because you have a feeling doesn't mean that it's actually true. Feelings don't mean anything until you consciously choose it to mean something. Where does it say bad emotion or wrong emotion? It doesn't until you consciously label it as that. For example, let's say you have a stomach ache, and then you just put it in the back of your mind, you just let it go, and then it usually just goes away. But if you have a stomach ache and then a woman's like, what if I'm pregnant? Or you label it as, what if I'm having a heart attack? Then you become stressed and then you suffer because of it. All negative perceptions and emotions exist either in the past or the future, I've found. If one is feeling heartbreak, sadness, or depression, then they're held up in the past. Anxiety and stress are more futuristic emotions. And what I mean by that is that if you feel depressed, then usually you're taking some story from your past, or you're making up some feeling from your past, and you're letting it decide the current moment. You're letting the past determine how you are thinking and feeling and acting in this moment because of what you're creating in your head. If you're feeling anxiety or stress, then you tend to be overthinking. And what overthinking is, it's the act of creating problems in your head that don't actually exist. And so anxiety and stress are basically you're thinking in the future of something that may or may not happen, which is very harmful for your way of thinking. You look into your mind and you find a problem. For example, show me ugly, or show me pretty, show me worthless, or show me unworthy. You can't show me physically because they're a thought, and you're able to change your thoughts instantly, is what I found. And if you don't believe me, then let me share you a story on actually how that's very true. So, and I'm even telling you that I will change your perception instantly, and it's still going to get you. For example, there's this story. So imagine that you're in a train, and there's a man. He's riding this train, and there's 4 people in this train car. There's 2 men, and then there's 2 children. The men don't know each other. The children seem to be with one of the men. One of the men is sitting in a seat. He's reading a book. While he's reading the book, these kids, they're running back and forth down this train car. They're very obnoxious. They're yelling. He's getting annoyed. He can't really focus on his book. Closes the book, looks out the window. The kids calm down. He goes back to his book. He's like, okay, they're calm. I want to go back to my book. He starts reading his book again. While he's reading the book again, the kids they start to act up. Again, they start yelling, they start screaming, they start running around the train car, and he gets annoyed. So he shuts the book again, and while he's sitting there, he's like, you know what, let me just go get a coffee. He gets a coffee, comes back, and while he's sitting there drinking his coffee, the kids, they're running around, they're so obnoxious that they actually run into him, and he spills the coffee all over himself on the table. Frustrated and annoyed, he stands up, and he goes to the other man in that room, and he's like, dude, you need to control your kids. He's like, they're acting up, they spilled the coffee, I can't even read my book. And the guy points to him, he's very calmly, he's like, come outside. This is a true story. He's like, come outside. So they go outside on the train car while the train is moving. He's like, listen, I didn't want to say this in front of the kids, but something you need to know is that I'm not their father. He said, I'm actually the person that's taken them to an orphanage because last week their parents, they passed away in a terrible car accident, and the kids, they haven't really been handling it well. They've been very wild, very rowdy ever since, and it's been very hard to control them, and so I apologize for that. And instantly that man's, his anger went to sadness and remorse, because he's like, holy shit, like they're orphans, like their family died. And so he's like, you know, I'm so sorry. He's like, go do what you have to do. He's like, if there's anything I can do, please let me know. Instantly in that moment, his perception changed from anger to sadness and remorse, because he was telling himself a message about those kids. He was telling himself, you know, they're just rowdy kids, like they have bad parenting, maybe they're just annoying little brats, is what he was telling himself in that moment. But what caused him to change that perception was a different way to look at that situation, and it happened when the guy told him that he's not actually the kid's father, he's the person who's taken them to the orphanage. And so he saw this situation from a completely different perspective, and that's what I'm trying to help you understand with depression, is that if you feel depressed, then you are seeing yourself and you're seeing your life from the small, little, minute angle. And there's millions of different angles that you can see. There's a whole 360 of angles, up and down, 360, that you can look at your life. And instead of telling yourself this story, instead of telling yourself this sad story, try to change the perception of what you have on that moment, in that moment. For example, what is this pain? What is this emotion is trying to tell me? Does this really have a reflection on me, or am I overthinking? What can I do right now to really change that? And then once you're able to do that, then you can look at it from all these different perspectives. And once you see something from a different perspective, it tends to change the way that you communicate to yourself in that moment. And so that's what I learned how to do over the course of many years. And I'm glad to say that I actually haven't had depression in over 4 years. I haven't even felt a drop of it, just because of the way that I communicate to myself. And this really not only affects your moods and your emotion, but it helps you over your overall life, with your romantic life, with your business life. And so I'm asking you to really see it from a different angle, different perspective. And I promise you it's going to change your life. And it's going to be hard for you to feel depressed if you can just communicate to yourself differently and tell yourself a different story on what that feeling really is in that moment. So if you need help with handling your emotions, or if you need help with depression or getting through moods, or really trying to flatten out that volatility wave because usually depression, it comes in waves, right? It gets very, very bad, and then it gets okay, and then it gets very, very bad. If you need help with handling your emotions or your moods in that wave, then the quickest way to get a hold of me is to go to my website and book a paid coaching session with yours truly. On that note, I'm Sonic Kim, America's Face of Dating, and I'll see you next time.